Hi, everyone. These companies' commitment to daily active engagement to each of their companies in their portfolio has led them to be one of the biggest venture capitals in New York and in the world. Let me introduce HL Ventures. Hello, everyone. Welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. Today, we are joined by Oliver Libby, co-founder and managing partner at HL Ventures. Welcome, Oliver. Please introduce yourself.
Well, Sam, I'm very pleased to be here. Thanks so much. And yes, I'm a co-founder and managing partner here at HL Ventures and our subsidiary City Rock Venture Partners, and really excited for the conversation today. Thanks for having me.
And we're really excited that you're here with us. I mean, you are a master speaker already throughout some of the most important places in the world. But before we get into that part, I want actually to dive a little deeper into your background, Oliver. I mean, before HL, before everything, you began your journey working in the US government, right? So how was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I think, it's easy to get stuck in a sector. A lot of people view themselves as people who are just in the private sector, just in philanthropy, just in the government, and become, in some cases, even kind of afraid or distrustful of other sectors and kind of leery of what the value that they can bring. I've spent time in all three of those sectors in my career. I run a nonprofit as well as running my venture firm. I did get my start in the national security world in the US government, actually very early in my career on Capitol Hill. And it's a very different world, but it's really important to understand how it works. I mean, in the innovation sector in America, so for what I do now, if we don't understand that, for example, a lot of the dollars behind fundamental research that backs a lot of the technology and science companies that we might invest in is from the government, and one of the biggest potential buyers of the software and services and technologies that we back is also the government, then we are at a disadvantage. So for me, it was really formative to be able to serve in the government and to have that experience. I've stayed close in that world and still maintain a lot of relationships there. And that, I think, has been a great benefit for my career, but it's also opened my view as to all the different tools we have available to understand and to effectuate change in the industries that we support.
Right. So it's like having a person in the inside, right? Which it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's not a secret that a lot of people in the venture industry kind of, at best, distrust the government and don't like things that are GovTech or that depend on a government buyer. I had a hand in being one of the early team members at a fund called Sinewave Ventures, which actually works very closely with HL. And Sinewave's entire premise was connecting the hill and the valley, hence the sine wave, right? And the idea was you should back really strong commercial businesses that have a great commercial, a case to win with corporations and industrial companies, but you shouldn't ignore the potential to work with the government. And you can actually get a lot of revenue and a lot of traction there. And so, the key is to not be afraid of any sector. And so, yeah, it's been helpful that I had a little inside experience. My business partner, Eric at Hudson Amos, was in government too at the state and local level. And so we really do have that experience behind us.
Right. Thank you very much for that insight. I really appreciate it. Now, let's move into HL's just a little bit more, right? At the very beginning, I mentioned that the very first part of your model or of your business model, right, is active daily engagement with your companies. But could you explain to us a little bit further your business model?
Yeah, so a little bit of this requires you to kind of understand and then challenge the traditional approach to venture capital. So for your listeners, venture capital has a lot of mythology. We talk about unicorns and we talk about multi-billion-dollar companies and exits. And in fact, the list that's kind of like the Nobel Prize for people in the venture industry is the Midas list. Like everything you touch turns into gold. In fact, I think that's not really the way this works. One of the dirty little secrets of venture capital is that as a group, all the venture capital firms over the last half a century have probably returned most of every dollar that's been invested. There's arguments it's a little more, a little less, but it's not a really great industry to invest in as a whole. Individual firms can do better. The question is, what makes the outperformance happen? What makes a firm better? I'll be the first to say, I'm to say it publicly on your podcast, I don't think I have the Midas touch. I think that we meet really interesting entrepreneurs, that we do really good research, that we make our best judgment on who might be a really successful entrepreneur. And then the work begins, Sam. And that's the daily active engagement part. So we always said the underwriting, what we call underwriting, this is the research, the due diligence, the understanding of the opportunity, which takes a couple of months. You can only take that so far. Now it's your best estimate, your best guess as to whether this is an investable company. Once you've gotten involved, you can just sit beside the company and check in every quarter and gee, like, I hope it works out and maybe I'll help here and there, or you can really get in. And so for us, we test every company for the relevance of our networks and capabilities, and then we work every day and do it. One of the key things, Sam, also is we're set up as a holding company. So we actually have a bit of a larger team than most venture capital firms do. And that lets us do this across the portfolio. Because the other thing about venture capital is everyone assumes you're going to lose most of your companies, right? Isn't that the way that everyone, every venture capital firm, the top 2 or 3 big companies they invested in pay for everything else. The rest of it's kind of a failure. They fail forward. It's cool. We don't believe that. So we have a very low failure rate. And the reason for that, I think, is the active engagement. So it's a critical part of our business.
All right. Thank you very much for that. That's actually quite insightful, starting from the way a VC works. Now, following this line of expertise you already have, you've been over 14 years in venture capital. In your opinion, Oliver, what makes a good startup pitch?
That's a really interesting question. I think there's a lot of components to it. So we get pitched somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 times a year. And my nonprofit also sees something like 1,000 pitches a year. So we're seeing a lot of the pitches. And I think, first of all, being prepared and having authenticity is really important. One of the things we think is important to understand about entrepreneurship is it's very hard. This is not a secret, but one of the keys to being able to survive the process is to have a deep belief in the problem you're trying to solve and the solution you're bringing to it. And so most entrepreneurs that we think have a really credible pitch come with a deep understanding of a problem, a flexible mindset as to the solution, because the solution might change, right? You can pivot, you can find better ways of doing it. You have to have an open mind, which is really important, but an authentic, deep dedication to solving a problem. That's number one. Number two, being prepared, right? There's nothing worse than talking to an entrepreneur and saying, well, what kind of intellectual property protections are you going to need? And they're like, I don't know. We're just kind of like, well, you can say, I'm not entirely sure. This is my first time building a company, but I'm really I believe that we have some things that we can patent here. Okay, we can work with that. But people who are unprepared, it doesn't last very long. I think it's really important to demonstrate in a pitch the mixture of confidence and humility, that the midpoint of which is a great entrepreneur. So great entrepreneurs are confident, right? And they have charisma and they light up the room and they do all those things, right? But it's not just the archetype of kind of the hoodie wearing future billionaire who's like right about everything and like, just back me, give me some money and I'm going to do the rest. For us, it's much more about someone who says, look, I really believe I see a problem clearly. I understand what I need to do, but I need your help. And I need more than just dollars. I really want the expertise from your team. Here are the people that I think I need to hire. Here's what I want to surround myself in terms of the intellectual and the capability set that's going to help us be successful here. And I know that this is going to change a bunch over the next few years, but we're going to do it together. That's really successful. So, look, there's all sorts of other tactical things we can go into here about the pitch deck and the financial model and the way you approach it. But ultimately, if you're authentic, if you know your brief and you're prepared, and you have that good midpoint between confidence and humility, that's a really good starting point.
Wow, thank you very much. I didn't really expect to have such a personal response, so I really think it's great. Thank you very much for that, Oliver. Now,
well,
actually,
Sam, I'll just add one thing there too, which is the later an investor gets involved, the more data there is, right? So people who get involved in the growth stages, you can look at, your revenues and your traction and your customer acquisition costs and the patents you've gotten. We get involved in the venture studio often at the very beginning, and even in the City Rock funds at Series A. And so we have to have an approach that's more human, right? We have to have an approach that's more human, that really understands the person we're sitting across from, because oftentimes there really isn't a lot of data to go on.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now, actually, you already mentioned your family funds, basically, right? The HL Studio and City Rock Ventures. Could you please tell us a little bit more about those? How are they different from HL Ventures as a whole?
Yeah, so HL Studios is our venture studio. We work with about 4 to 5 companies per year on a new company basis. We help co-found some of them, others that come to us, sometime around the seed round. And there we get compensated some part in equity. We make an investment as well, normally. And then we work really hard to help the companies scale. Once the company gets to Series A, they're eligible for investment from the City Rock Venture Partners funds, which focus on Series A and later. We also do some work outside the studio there. So the City Rock funds will invest in both the studio companies and outside companies. It's about 50-50 is the goal. And for us, it's not a guarantee that the studio companies get funded, right? They have to be doing well. But all the companies, no matter what portfolio they're in, have access to that platform of daily active engagement. So whether you're a Series B company in the portfolio or a brand new company, you get access to the full platform, to all the resources we can provide, because again, that's how we think we're different. But they're two fundamentally different vehicles, and there's kind of a bright line, like a handoff between those vehicles at the Series A level.
Wow, thank you very much for that. And on the same question, you've already mentioned a couple of times your nonprofit. Oliver, could you tell us a little bit more about your nonprofit?
Sure, it's obviously separate from the venture fund, although we share a lot of knowledge and DNA. So the Resolution Project is, I think, the largest, if not one of the largest, accelerators for student social entrepreneurs in the world. So we work all around the world. We're, I think, in 86 countries. We're all across the U.S. as well. And if you're a student at a university and you have an idea for a social venture, you can apply through one of our social venture challenge competitions. We do them in person and virtually all around the world. And you get a grant up to $10,000. So it's not a lot of money. But you also get unlimited access to mentorship and support from our network, which is a global network and very powerful. Interestingly enough, over the years, Resolution Project has now grown to over 600 entrepreneurs all across the world, as I mentioned, helping over 6 million people and having generated billions of dollars in market cap and revenues. So we're really proud of the community. And obviously, these are kind of we run Resolution a little bit like a startup, and we run HL a little bit like, kind of an impact-oriented venture firm. And so there's a lot of kind of, shared culture between those two organizations.
Wow, thank you very much for that. I really like it. Thank you. Now, actually, throughout this, I've already noticed you are quite the philanthropist in a way, right? I mean, you have your nonprofit, and you support a lot of companies. Now, on your website, you have a specific section exclusively dedicated to sustainable development goals companies, right, that you fund. How did you come to actually orient an entire section of your company into companies that work on these lines, like equality, no poverty, zero hunger, etc.?
Well, it's actually every single company. So the SDGs section of our website is impact evaluation, but it applies to so we don't do any companies at all at HL that are not impact related.
Wow.
And look, the reason for that is, I mean, it comes a lot from my background and my partner's background too, which is we're from the world. My family are all in science and medicine. I spend time in government, and the things that link those experiences are you're surrounded by diversity, you're surrounded by challenges and by mission orientation, right? So people are really motivated. And I have to say, I came into the startup economy in the early 2000s, and suddenly I was like, whoa, where did all the mission orientation go? Where did all the diversity go? Everybody looks basically like me, and everyone went to the same 5 schools, and they're building like better photo sharing apps. And so I kind of thought to myself, like, well, there has to be a better way and a more elevated, kind of mission for venture capital. And I don't think everyone has to do it this way, although I actually suspect more and more people are moving in the direction of evaluating their investments by impact. What I'll tell you, Sam, is, actually, I'll tell you too in this way. We have a presentation just like any fund or startup, right? And in our presentation, we have, as you say, a section that deals with impact measurement and management. The UN SDGs are part of that. And if an investor wants to have a conversation with me about those things, they're welcome to, and I think it will lead to a deeper understanding of why we're able to be successful. If they don't want to talk to me about that, they can just talk to us about our investment performance, which I'm very proud of, and we can set aside the impact and diversity, but they would be missing the point, which is, I think impact and diversity help drive returns. Diverse founding teams have more resilience, I think, on average. They see problems more clearly, and they bring more tools to the problem of creating a company. And impact motivates teams. And so if you can build a really cool energy efficiency company, or a really cool company that generates better healthcare outcomes for a community, or better financial inclusion, or a new future of work that's more inclusive, I think that you're going to find that your employees are more motivated, your investors are more enthusiastic, and eventually you're going to have more sticky and strong customer relationships too. So I think impact and diversity drive better results. And that's one of the core premises for the firm. So, I wish it were just philanthropy, but it's also self-interested. We think this is going to do better economically. And if those two things can dovetail, then that makes for, I think, a really fun way to live your life.
Right. Wow. Thank you very much for that. Honestly, it's admirable, and it's kind of happening, the way that you go come at it. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. Following this path of trying sort of to help not just the world in a sense, but also helping people in business and entrepreneurs, etc. Just a few days ago, like 3 days ago or something, you unveiled a new project called the Frontlines Corner, right? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, Frontlines Corner is just me talking a little bit like this about topics of the day. And I mean, I don't know how else to say this. It's like vaguely embarrassing to have stuff like this, but people seem to think it's not totally uninteresting to hear what I have to say on some things. And so actually for me, it's been like 15 years of resisting stuff like that. And then finally they were like, no, you really have to start this thing. So look, I'm really happy with it. I think it's going to be really exciting. I certainly invite any of your listeners to tune in. It's going to be mostly on LinkedIn. And yeah, I mean, we just recorded a couple of segments on, one of the big venture capital firms just split into 3 venture capital firms. We talked about that. We talked a little bit about the fact that, climate change is becoming more real to people. Like, for example, I happen to be in New York yesterday, and today we had, looked like the apocalypse was coming with the skies, and people were like, yeah, dude, we need to do something about climate change. And I was like, yeah, dudes, I've been working on that for 17 years, but, welcome to the party. And like, yes, sir, let's get going. But, so we recorded a Frontlines Corner about that. But, it's just going to be a place for us to talk about interesting things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be very interesting as well. I noticed that first episode was about AI and how AI is affecting business. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting. But now,
yeah, and look, my pledge is to talk straight, right? Like it's to say, like, I mean, if you took a look at them, these are all like 2 or 3 minutes long, right? So really bite-sized. But I mean, for AI, like, yeah, obviously AI is huge, right? It's going to have a formative impact, a transformative impact. But we also need to understand what it can do and what it can't do and when. And ChatGPT is pretty impressive tech, but it's a tool, and it does certain things and it doesn't do other things. If you're looking for ChatGPT to be perfectly truthful with you at all times and be correct all the time, like to have like if you were depending on ChatGPT to diagnose cancer, I wouldn't be really super happy about that, because ChatGPT doesn't really know if it's right or not. It's a really sophisticated form of sentence completion, and it's impressive, right? And there's some really cool things you can do with it. There's also some things you can't do with it. And so I think, just with anything, like when there's a big fad and everybody's talking about AI, it's important as the consumer of those, for your listeners, as the consumer of those technologies, as a user, just always keep an eye on what it can do, what it can't do, and then just proceed accordingly.
Right. I totally agree with you. There are very heated conversations whether AI will kill many businesses or not. We can talk about that later on. But for now, I want to move a little bit into more about your journey and your history doing, venture capital. You've already said it. You've been at it for 17 years, approximately, right? At least 14 in HL that you have already funded. Over the course of all these years, do you have that particular startup or project that you funded that sort of stands out of the line, that maybe you felt more attached to, or that was simply just far too good to be true?
So we really try not to pick favorites. And I think that, I don't mean to kind of weasel out of answering your question, but I will say, like, one of the big insights that I have found is that the companies that keep you really motivated and excited over the journey of doing this work for years at a time change. And even those companies intrinsically change. So of course, there's companies that I'm very publicly associated with that I'm super excited about. We spent a lot of time with companies like Sealed and Lollyware and Block Power and Sourcero. I mean, there's more. But the truth is, like, you never know which one of those is going to be the one that makes the name for you, for the firm, for whatever. And so for us, it's about being there with the founders, being there through thick and thin, through the entire journey. And then surprising things might happen, So, I mean, from my perspective, that's the beauty of this business, is you can't predict the ones that are going to be successful. And so you work hard on all of them.
Thank you very much for that. It's not whistling out. I give you that. It was a really thoughtful. It was a really thoughtful response. Thank you. Now going back into a bit more of your personal journey, Oliver. As I mentioned at the beginning, you have been invited to speak in really high regard places at Harvard, which is where you graduated cum laude, the United Nations, countless business conferences. But I have to ask, how was that very first experience like? The first time you were at that massive podium?
Well, I'll tell you a story. So I've actually, I mean, I've been very blessed to be kind of on stage my whole life. I've been also a singer and a performer. I love it. I love being on stage. I love talking to people. But I'll tell you one story. So when we started the Resolution Project, we did a partnership very early on with the United Nations. And I did like model UN when I was in high school and college. I loved simulating the UN. And I had even visited the UN one time as a visitor, which was really cool. And then I was behind the kind of dark marble podium with the UN seal, and I was going to address something called the Youth Assembly of the UN, which is delegates from all around the world in the UN General Assembly. And I just remember having like that moment where, I'm usually very, like ready to go out in front of the crowd. You can kind of shove me out if you're at a wedding and you need someone to give a toast, I'm your guy, right? But I had that moment of saying like, wow, like this is just like something that I envisioned and manifested for my whole life. And I'm about to go into this place where like John F. Kennedy and incredible people spoke in that very podium. And it's important to just take those moments and try and bottle them and use them as motivation and just say like, yes, like it is possible. Most of your life is taking these little steps along the way. And like any mountain climber will say, like, don't look down necessarily, but it's important to look back and see the road that you've traveled. And that was one of those moments.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I cannot even imagine the excitement and the feelings, right, of being in such a iconic place, I would say. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Coming back into HL a little bit and more about more or less the current state of the company, right? So right now, for what I was able to gather, you have approximately 47 active companies in your portfolio as of right now. I mean, normally I guess they're rotating every now and then. How many of them are you actually actively involved in? The whole 47, or do you have like a whole team of managing partners?
No, so we're engaged with all of them, right? I mean, we try and be in active engagement with every company in the portfolio. That's our model. Of course, I rely a lot on our vice president of platform, Galina Osger, who's amazing. Galina and I and our core team then kind of deploy a larger group of people that we have. So we have a wonderful team of advisors, venture partners, experts in residence, and a trusted partner network of experts that's global. And so we can bring those people to bear. But the truth is, like, the whole business model for my firm is for all the active portfolio companies, they have access to me, to Galina, and to our senior team, and then to our broader resources, which we deploy. So, sometimes I'm giving the advice myself. Sometimes I'm like a switchboard operator, plugging in the right resource. But the idea is for us to be actively engaged as close to day to day with every company in the portfolio. So we don't pick favorites. We're in the mix with every company.
Wow, that's actually pretty cool. There are some venture capitals that have seen that they have sort of selected people for selected companies, which I think it's different, right? But I really like this approach. So thank you very much for that. And for all of these companies, I mean, naturally there is a lot of cash flow involved. There's a lot of money involved. How do you make sure that these companies, well, maybe not make sure, but how do you keep an eye on the cash flow, that they keep it safe, that they have a strong procurement process? How do you keep an eye on this?
Well, that's a complicated question because as a VC, we have certain rights, but we don't control the companies. We're not a private equity firm, so we don't buy the companies. So oftentimes you sit on the board, you have a board observer seat, you get quarterly financials. But probably the best way that I've found, other than just making sure that you review those things, is to be in there proactively working with the management to help them understand why having really strong practices and why proceeding with good fiscal prudence is important. So, for example, middle of last year, when the storm clouds started gathering economically, we started talking well before it was popular about companies maybe raising more money, having 2 years of burn, thinking a lot about when they would be profitable. We've never been a firm that was chasing unicorns per se, and so the idea of growth at all costs and breaking the company to just grow 500% a year, that's not our approach. Never was. But I think that's much more in vogue now, and that's really important. So, just no matter what kind of company you're trying to build, having some idea of when you're going to be profitable and how is really important.
Right. Thank you very much for that. That's actually pretty interesting. And I mean, I did also notice that one of the ways that you help these companies be successful is by using your talented trust network, talent trust network, right?
Trusted partner network. Yep.
Yeah, your trusted partner network. Sorry about that. And I mean, while looking at it, I noticed that actually anybody can apply to it. So maybe there's some of our active listeners that might be a really good fit for that network. Could you please tell us a bit more about it?
There's two different things there. We have the Trusted Partner Network, which is heavily recruited. That's available to our founders. And then we do have a talent pool, which we definitely welcome anyone to be a part of. And we're constantly helping our portfolio companies hire from that pool or bring expertise in. That's available on our website, which is h-l.vc. It's in the talent section. And anyone who's interested should put their information up there. We are always trying to find good talent for our companies.
All right, that is amazing. So everybody, listen up. They're waiting for your talent. Thank you very much for that. Now, before we close this out, Oliver, I mean, you've already given us plenty of advice on pitches, on your journey, on investing overall. But as an entrepreneur that you are, because you founded HL, what advice would you give any young entrepreneurs that are starting their own path?
Yeah, I mean, I could and maybe should write a book about this, but the key things take me back to an answer from earlier in our conversation, Sam, which is I think you've got to think about, if you're an entrepreneur, be authentic about the problem you want to solve and become a real expert in it. Be really open to the team and the village that it takes to build these things. Understand how hard it is. Everyone talks about up and to the right, but really the experience is up and down all day long. You need to build a lot of resilience to that. Understand the power of the network and how much it's not just about you when you're building the business. Certainly has been the case for me, right? It's all been about knowing great people and bringing them in. And I think those are really the key things. Beyond that, there's lots and lots of tactics and operations in doing this, but fundamentally, you need to build something that's authentic to you with a great group of people and know that it's going to be hard. And if you can onboard those things, then you have a better chance than average of being successful.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. I think it's a great advice. And if you ever write a book, I'm going to be right in line to read it. So hopefully you're going to get around to that. Thank you. And I believe that advice is the perfect way for us to finish this interview. Again, thank you very much, Oliver, for being here, sharing your experiences, your thoughts, your journey. Where can we find you at HL Ventures? Do you have any social media handles?
Yeah, sure. I mean, most importantly, h-l.vc is our website. We're really active on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter at Oliver B. Libby, but LinkedIn is the place where you can find most of our content, the Frontlines Corner pieces and all that. So we welcome that, and certainly follow our firm as well, HL Ventures, and would love to stay in touch with your community. Sam, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much again, Oliver. Remember, guys, that you can find more information, interesting articles, and interviews directly on our website, controlhub.com/builder-nation. We're going to love to hear from you. Again, thank you very much for being part of this community. We're going to see you in the next episode. Oliver, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Take care.
When building the future is your priority, tedious procurement processes should be last on your list. The problem is that purchasing data is scattered across spreadsheets, receipts, emails, and messages. Tracking it all sucks and makes it easy to commit mistakes. Introducing the ControlHub Way, the all-in-one purchasing software for hardware companies. Buying parts, services, or office supplies? Submit a quick purchase request to buy from your list of approved vendors, or buy from a new provider. Buying from approved vendors is even easier. Import your shopping cart directly into your purchase request using our checkout integrations. When the order is ready, submit it for approval. We'll ping all pre-designated approvers both via ControlHub's website, email, and Slack notifications for a faster turnaround. If you need a PO, we got you. Generate it in one click. Online purchase? Boom, virtual card. Do an automatic 3-way match, pay invoices, and sync everything live with QuickBooks or NetSuite. Purchasing just got a lot easier. ControlHub. Get back to building.